February 14th, 1943, near Sidi Bou Zid, Tunisia. The desert wind howls across the dunes, carrying the smell of burning oil and cordite. German Corporal Karl Müller lies face down in the sand, his rifle half buried beside him, ears still ringing from the explosion that flipped his half-track minutes earlier. Around him, men in Feldgrau uniforms lift their hands, some in surrender, others in disbelief. The Afrika Corps has been broken. American Sherman tanks rumble over the ridge, their turrets scanning the smoking battlefield. The insignia of the USA. 1st Armored Division flashes in the sun, the old Ironsides. Behind them, Gizfan out cautiously, rifles at the ready. "Hands up! Hände hoch!" a sergeant yells, motioning for the captured Germans to gather. Müller and his comrades obey. They're exhausted, filthy, and starving. For months, they've fought Rommel's war across the North African sands from El Agheila to Kasserine. They've lived on half rations, slept in dugouts, and fought American tanks that seem to multiply every day. Now, it's over. One of the prisoners, a lieutenant from Würzburg, mutters bitterly, "We'll be in London by next week, or dead by morning." But he's wrong. None of them are going to London. They're going somewhere far stranger and far safer. March 1943, Oran Harbor, Algeria. A column of 500 German prisoners boards the USS West Point, a converted troopship. The men are searched, catalogued, and divided by rank. They expect misery, maybe chains, maybe humiliation. Instead, they are met by polite American MPs offering coffee. "Drink up," one guard says with a grin. "You'll need it where you're going." The ship sets sail for the United States. The men are silent at first, watching the coastline vanish. Karl Müller clutches his tunic, the last piece of home he owns. He whispers, "America?" as though the word itself feels unreal. For men raised on Nazi propaganda, America is supposed to be a land of corruption and chaos. A land of criminals and mongrels, as the Reich's broadcasts had called it. None of them expect kindness. None of them expect what's coming. April 1943, Camp Hearn, Texas. The heat hits like a hammer. The air smells of mesquite and dust. Rows of wooden barracks stretch across the prairie, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. But the guards are lounging in the shade, rifles slung casually. As the prisoners are processed, they pass signs in English and German. Work is honor, fair pay for fair work. They think it's a joke. Then a clerk explains, through an interpreter, "Every man will receive wages for his labor, 80 cents per day." The camp falls silent. The German lieutenant who once fought in Crete stares blankly. 80 cents? To do what? "Whatever you're good at," the clerk replies. "Carpentry, farming, repairs. You'll be assigned work tomorrow." Karl Müller laughs out loud, earning confused looks from his comrades. They're paying us to build their fences? But by the end of the first week, disbelief turns to astonishment. The prisoners are given soap, fresh clothes, even sports equipment. Each man is issued coupons redeemable at the camp canteen: cigarettes, chocolate, stationery, and sometimes even Coca-Cola. At night, they listen to music on the camp loudspeakers: Glenn Miller, Bing Crosby. The rhythm is foreign, but comforting. A few men weep quietly in their bunks. May 1943, inside camp life. By now, routines have formed. Prisoners wake at dawn, line up for roll call, then disperse to work details. Some harvest cotton under civilian supervision. Others repair farm machinery. Skilled craftsmen are assigned to woodworking shops or metal sheds. For every day of labor, they earn credit slips, small paper tokens that function like camp currency. They can buy coffee, razor blades, or writing paper. Every Saturday there's mail call. Letters arrive from home, censored but intact. Müller reads one from his sister in Frankfurt. "We are rationed to 2 potatoes per day. The city is dark at night. We hear the sirens almost every week now." He looks around the canteen, at prisoners eating eggs and toast, at the jukebox humming softly in the corner. He feels something like guilt. At night, debates break out. Some insist it's all a trick propaganda to break their will. Others, like Sergeant Heinz Kohler, shake their heads. If this is propaganda, It's better than anything the Reich gave us. June 1943 Ampere's soccer game in Texas. The guards watch from the fence as two teams of Germans square off on a dusty field. They've painted their own team banners of Afrika Korps versus Luftwaffe. When a corporal scores, the crowd roars. Even the American guards cheer. One of them, Private Lenny Kaufman from Ohio, grins at his partner. Hell, these fellas play better than we do. For the first time, the prisoners are treated not as enemies, but as men. Some Americans even begin to befriend them. They exchange small gifts, a wristwatch for a pack of Lucky Strikes, a carved chess set for a can of coffee. The war feels distant now, but the letters from home remind them otherwise. In late June, a new message arrives. Cologne has been bombed, thousands dead, food shipments halted. That night, Muller sits outside the barracks, staring at the stars over the Texas prairie. He says softly, "If this is captivity, I don't want freedom anymore." A fellow prisoner nods beside him. Maybe this is what freedom is supposed to feel like. July 1943, the work contracts. When harvest season begins, the War Department signs agreements with local farmers. German POWs are leased out as laborers paid through the government at standard wages. Farmers are astonished. The Germans work hard, follow orders, and sing while they labor. One farmer in Georgia tells a reporter, "They're the best hands I've ever hired." The prisoners, too, are shocked, not by hardship, but by trust. American civilians bring them food. Children wave at them. Women drop off lemonade on the field trucks. One young boy asks, "Are you bad guys?" A German private replies, "Not anymore." And maybe, in that moment, he means it. Each night, as the sun bleeds across the horizon, the camp loudspeaker plays a familiar tune, "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree." And inside the barbed wire, hundreds of enemy soldiers hum along, men who once followed a dictator now tapping their boots to an American love song. The war rages across the oceans. But here, in the quiet heart of Texas, something remarkable is happening. Enemies are learning to be human again. July 12th, 1943, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. The morning humidity hangs heavy over the barracks like a wet blanket. Heat ripples across the red Alabama clay as German prisoners file into the central square for roll call. It's already 85 degrees by 0800, and the insects are out in force. Flies buzz around the latrines. Cicadas scream from the pine trees beyond the fences. Corporal Karl Muller wipes sweat from his brow as he stands in formation. The MP guard, a farm kid from Illinois, calls out names in German with a southern drawl. "Muller, Karl." "Here." Behind him, someone chuckles. "We're going to melt before the war ends." The routine has become second nature. Roll call, work detail, meal, then downtime if you earned it. And Mueller has earned it. Since arriving in Aliceville a month ago, he's been part of a repair crew fixing trucks for the U.S. Army. It's monotonous, greasy work, but it's also quiet, safe, and surprisingly well compensated. He's made enough in script to buy a new set of playing cards, a harmonica, and a bottle of Coca-Cola, his first ever. He'd laughed the first time he took a sip. "Tastes like sweet engine oil," he said, but he finished it anyway. Inside the wire, Camp Aliceville holds nearly 6,000 prisoners, making it one of the largest POW camps in the United States. It's a city behind barbed wire, complete with its own bakery, barbershop, chapel, and even a makeshift movie theater built out of scrap wood. Every few weeks, the camp shows reels of American news war updates, Roosevelt speeches, even cartoons. Some prisoners scoff. Others watch in silence. One film shows the bombing of Hamburg. Mueller sees smoke billowing from what looks like his old neighborhood. The grainy black and white footage flickers, then cuts to smiling American GIs loading aid supplies. He looks away. Later that night, he writes to his sister, "The Americans do not treat us like beasts. They feed us. They even let us laugh." What does that say about our own Reich? August 1943, the baseball game. The camp hosts a baseball tournament between guard units. The prisoners are invited to watch. Benches are dragged out. A loudspeaker cracks to life. Someone passes out bags of peanuts. Ever play? One guard asks a German prisoner. A tall, blonde, Luftwaffe mechanic named Dieter nods. Once, in Bremen. The Americans stationed there before the war taught me. They hand him a mitt. Within days, a group of German prisoners form their own team. They sew uniforms from spare denim. They paint bats with oil-based stains. They name the team the Bavarian Bears. When they take the field against an MP team 2 weeks later, the crowd, half American guards, half German POWs, erupts in cheers. The Bavarian Bears lose 7-4, but spirits soar. For 2 hours, the war recedes. Language barriers melt under shared laughter and the satisfying crack of a bat-meeting ball. Even in a prison camp, men still need something to belong to: books and beliefs. Every major POW camp is assigned a cultural officer, usually an American fluent in German, to oversee education programs. At Camp Aliceville, that man is Lieutenant Harold Benson, a former literature professor from Yale. He brings in books: Goethe, Schiller, Shakespeare, even translated Mark Twain. At first, few prisoners care. But soon, book clubs form. Debates start. One group stages a performance of Hamlet in the camp theater. Another starts writing a camp newspaper, hand-typed and passed from barracks to barracks. A former philosophy student named Klaus Weber writes in the second issue, "They've taken our weapons, they've taken our flags, but they cannot take thought, they cannot take dignity." That line circulates widely, even among the guards. But not all is peaceful. Ideological divide. By late summer, tensions rise between hardline Nazi loyalists and other POWs who now question the Reich. One night, a moderate named Ernst Bocher is beaten unconscious in his bunk after openly criticizing Hitler during a poetry reading. His attackers carve a swastika into the wall beside his bed. The Americans intervene immediately. The camp commandant orders the Gestapo loyalists moved to a separate compound. Karl Müller watches them go, escorted by armed MPs. He recognizes a few former Afrika Korps officers who still wear their medals proudly, even in captivity. He turns to Dieter and says, "They're not prisoners here. They're prisoners in their heads." Dieter nods. "And we were, too, once." Letters from home. By September, Red Cross letters begin arriving regularly. Most are censored. Some are gut-wrenching. Müller receives one from his mother in Berlin. "The bakery is gone. We live in the cellar. Your sister is ill. The neighbors were taken after the last raid. There is no more butter." He folds the letter carefully, reads it again, then once more. That night, he does not eat his full dinner. He tucks the roll into his pocket. He dreams of home. Autumn light. As fall descends over Alabama, the heat fades. The leaves turn, golden and brittle. The prisoners continue their routines, some chopping wood, others hauling coal, some fixing roads or tending gardens planted behind the mess hall. One day, an American farmer arrives at the gate with 2 baskets of apples. He offers them as thanks to the POWs who worked his fields that summer. "I don't care what country they come from," he tells the guard. "They did right by me." The gate opens. Apples are passed through. No orders, no money exchanged. Just trust. Müller takes one, polishes it on his shirt, and takes a bite. He closes his eyes. Not because he's hungry, but because it reminds him of orchards outside Würzburg, before the bombs, before the Reich, before the war turned boys into soldiers and men into ghosts. The days grow shorter, but something unexpected is growing inside the wire. Something like hope, something like memory, something like freedom. November 2nd, 1943, Camp Concordia, Kansas. The wind cuts cold across the plains. Dust whips between rows of wooden barracks, swirling under the gray Kansas sky. The first snow flurries flicker across the barbed wire perimeter, landing softly on the shoulders of guards in overcoats and German prisoners in wool jackets stamped PW in bold white letters. Inside Barrack 17, Corporal Karl Müller stares at a Red Cross mail slip in his hands. The envelope is wrinkled, faintly damp from the weather, addressed in his sister's careful script. He doesn't open it right away. It's his 3rd letter from home in as many months, and each one is hit harder than the last. The first mentioned ration cuts, the second, bombings. But this one feels heavier, as if it carries the weight of something unspeakable. He takes it to his bunk and opens it slowly. Carl, they came for the Schumans. At night. Their children, too. The building was quiet the next day. Your old school teacher, Frau Becker, said nothing. We all said nothing. The sirens came again last week. We sleep in the cellar now. It's bitter cold, but your nephew sends his love. He says, "Tell Uncle Carl I want him to come home and bring chocolate." Mueller reads it twice, then a third time. He sets it on the bunk beside him, clenches his jaw, and doesn't speak for hours. November 4th, the shift begins. He's not the only one getting letters like this. At mealtimes and work details, the talk among prisoners changes. Less about when the war will end. More about what Germany will even look like when it does. "I haven't heard from Stuttgart in 5 months, a carpenter says one morning while repairing crates for a nearby railway depot. My wife's last letter mentioned ash falling from the sky. Another man from Cologne chimes in. There are no more trains. My mother says the station is rubble. At night, the camp newspaper typed by prisoners on salvaged typewriters starts printing neutral columns, agriculture tips, poetry, translated American news. But there's an undercurrent of despair and something else. Doubt. Doubt in the war. Doubt in the Reich. Doubt in what they were told. November 10th. The American Librarian. The camp's education center is a squat wooden building tucked near the north fence line. Inside, it's warm. The books smell like cardboard and dust. An American librarian, Miss Eleanor Hayes, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses and a soft southern drawl, has taken over the curation of reading material. She's not allowed to discuss politics, but she knows how to choose titles. One shelf is now filled with translated copies of the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, of Mice and Men, and the Grapes of Wrath. Prisoners come to read, and not just for the English practice. They come to understand the people who guard them, the country that feeds them. Mueller checks out The Rights of Man by Thomas Paine. He reads it cover to cover in 2 nights. When he returns it, he asks Miss Hayes in halting English, "Do Americans believe all people are equal? Really?" She looks at him. "Not all Americans, but enough of us do to write it down and fight over it." He nods slowly, unsure if he believes her, but sure that he wants to. November 16th, the counselor's report. Every POW camp has an official U.S. Army liaison tasked with psychological monitoring of the prisoners. At Camp Concordia, it's Captain Daniel Feldman, a German-speaking officer from Brooklyn with a background in sociology. He files a report that day. Signs of ideological shift among non-Nazi prisoners. Increased interest in democratic values. Frequent discussions around Geneva treatment. No escape attempts logged in 90 days. One group submitted a written request to form a re-education society modeled on American civics. He ends with a personal note. "We're not just housing men, we're changing them." November 22nd. A visit from the outside. A Red Cross inspection team arrives. European delegates, 1 Swiss, 1 Swedish, walk the camp with notebooks and cameras. They are escorted by American MPs, but they're given full access. They interview prisoners in private. When they ask Mueller what conditions are like, he answers honestly, "Better than my village before I left. We eat, we sleep, we work, and we are not afraid." The Swedish delegate, a woman in a gray overcoat, writes down the quote word for word. Before she leaves, she asks him if he would ever consider staying in America after the war. He doesn't answer, but the thought stays with him. November 26th, Thanksgiving. The mess hall is decorated with construction paper turkeys made by local school children. A few are slipped through the barbed wire gate by teachers, part of a small-town goodwill effort. The American Guards host a traditional dinner. Prisoners receive roasted turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes, and a slice of pumpkin pie. Some are wary, others are stunned. "This is a feast," whispers a stunned Wehrmacht sergeant. They feed prisoners better than Berlin feeds its own. One group of prisoners stands and offers to sing. They perform Silent Night first in German, then in broken English. No one claps. Some guards wipe their eyes. December 3rd, the petition. On this morning, The camp commandant receives a formal request signed by 23 prisoners. The document is handwritten, translated by a bilingual POW, and delivered respectfully. It reads, "We, the undersigned, request permission to remain in the United States following cessation of hostilities. We are not enemies of freedom. We are its students. We wish to contribute to peace here, if you will have us. The request cannot be granted, not yet. But the message is clear. Not every prisoner wants to go back. Not after what they've seen. Not after what they've learned. Not after what they feel. In the quiet of the Kansas winter, between barbed wire and guard towers, something irreversible is happening. Not surrender. No de défiance. Transformation. December 24th, 1943, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin. Snow falls in thick, soft sheets across the camp. The pine trees beyond the wire are heavy with it, bending under the weight. The barracks glow from within, yellow lamplight spilling through frosted windows. Inside, German prisoners sit quietly at long wooden tables, waiting. A Christmas tree stands in the corner, decorated with paper stars and bits of ribbon made from Red Cross wrappings. Above it hangs a wooden sign, carved by one of the POWs. Frieden auf Erden, peace on earth. At the front of the room, a chaplain in an olive uniform begins the service. He reads from the Gospel of Luke in slow, clear German. Outside, guards stand silently in the snow, hats pulled low, listening to the echo of the familiar words, the same scripture they heard as children in Iowa, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. Corporal Karl Mueller sits near the rear, arms folded, expression tight. He doesn't believe in much anymore, not in Hitler, not in victory, maybe not even in God. But when the camp choir begins to sing Stille Nacht, something shifts. The room grows still. By the time they finish, there are tears on more than one face, American and German alike. December 30th, language and loyalty. Mueller is selected for a special assignment. Language assistant to a civilian contractor working with the War Department's agricultural office. The job is simple: translate work orders, safety instructions, and farm contracts for German prisoners being sent to local orchards and dairy farms. But the conversations go deeper. One farmer in Toma asks him, "What made you boys follow that madman?" Mueller shrugs. Fear, patriotism, lies, the same things that start every war. He doesn't mention that back in Würzburg, he used to wear his Hitler Youth badge with pride, that he once turned in a neighbor for mocking a party speech, that he believed, for years, that he was fighting for something noble. Now, he translates documents that begin with, "The bearer of this letter is entitled to fair pay and humane treatment." And it feels right. January 1944. Education behind the wire. The War Department expands the re-education initiative. With oversight from the Office of War Information, select POW camps begin offering structured lectures on American government, democracy, and ethics. The program is voluntary and surprisingly popular. In Camp McCoy, a former university professor from Munich, Oberleutnant Franz Kramer, volunteers to lead a class on political theory. His first lecture is titled, "Where Nationalism Ends and Tyranny Begins." He opens by writing 3 words on the chalkboard. "We were wrong." A murmur ripples through the room. Some scoff. A few walk out, but most stay. One by one, they begin to speak not just about Hitler, but about the hollow promises of war, about the futility of conquest, about the neighbors who vanished, the silence, the guilt. Later, Mueller tells a friend, "We followed orders because we were told the world feared us. But the truth is, the world pitied us." February 1944, culture and contact. The camps begin hosting cultural exchanges. Local American musicians play concerts. Teachers from nearby towns volunteer to give English lessons. Even Boy Scout troops come to visit, shaking hands with former Wehrmacht soldiers through the wire. At Camp Atterbury, Indiana, a group of German POWs performs Faust on a makeshift stage, dressed in donated costumes. American officers and civilian guests applaud enthusiastically. A U.S. colonel calls the performance better than Broadway. Some guards are uneasy with the growing friendliness. One writes in his diary, "They're the enemy, but the more I talk to them, the more I wonder if I'd have done any different in their place." The line between us and them continues to blur. March 1944. The letter's home change tone. By now, German censors allow more detailed prisoner letters to reach home as long as they do not reveal military intelligence. Müller writes to his sister, "We are alive. We are treated not as enemies, but as men. I have not seen violence here. Only fairness. There are books, music, and questions, hard questions. And I think, maybe, answers." In his bunk, he rereads his own words and wonders how many of his former comrades would believe him, or even want to. April 1944 escapes and ironies. While most POWs remain content or even grateful, a few still dream of escape. 2 prisoners from Camp Papago Park in Arizona steal a rowboat and attempt to float down the Gila River to Mexico. The river runs dry halfway through. They surrender, hungry and sunburned. When questioned, one of them admits, "I thought America would be worse. I just wanted to go home. But now, I'm not so sure." At Camp McCoy, guards catch a prisoner digging a tunnel beneath the laundry hut. When interrogated, he doesn't claim ideological loyalty, only boredom. He later confesses, "I didn't want to go back to Germany. I just wanted something to do." He's reassigned to a furniture repair crew. He never tries again. May 1944 amperes. Simple act of trust. During a fire drill, a guard forgets to lock one of the outer gates. Dozens of prisoners are nearby armed only with tools and work gloves. No one makes a run for it. Instead, one prisoner walks over, knocks on the gate, and waits until an MP arrives. When asked why he didn't flee, he replies, "Where would I go? I eat here. I sleep here. I am safer here than I ever was in Hamburg." June 6th, 1944, D-Day. News of the Normandy invasion spreads like wildfire. American guards cheer. Church bells ring in the nearby towns. But inside the camps, the mood is more complex. Some prisoners fear what will happen to their families. Others wonder if the war will finally end. But a few, including Müller, sit quietly and whisper to each other, "Maybe now we can go back. Not to fight, but to rebuild." One man says softly, "Maybe now Germany can surrender and live." No one disagrees. The war is turning, and behind American fences, so are the hearts of men who once saluted tyranny. August 14th, 1944, Camp Trinidad, Colorado. The evening sun dips behind the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, casting long shadows across the rows of barracks. In the distance, thunder rumbles, but it's dry, the kind of storm that never reaches the ground. Inside the mess hall, Corporal Karl Müller sits at a corner table, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. His dinner tray is still half full: mashed potatoes, roast beef, and canned green beans. He hasn't touched it. His bunkmate, Klaus Weber, takes the seat across from him, a folded letter in his breast pocket. "Mail came. Berlin's still burning," he mutters. "My sister said the bombers came at night. They buried 20 inches the garden." Müller doesn't reply. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, crumpled form, the application for post-conflict residency review, printed in both English and German. He places it on the table between them. Weber stares at it. "You serious?" Müller finally speaks. "If I go home, there may not be a home to return to." August 15th, inside the fence, beyond the war. By now, German POWs across the United States have lived in captivity for more than a year, some over 2. And captivity doesn't feel like captivity anymore. They wake when they want. They eat 3 meals a day. They work in workshops or on farms. They are paid. At Camp Trinidad, prisoners even publish a German-language newspaper, Der Ruf, the Call. One recent issue includes an op-ed written by a theology student named Wilhelm Stein. Is freedom a matter of borders, or of how a man is treated? American guards don't confiscate it. One MP, a college student from Missouri, reads it and tells his partner, "These guys think more than my professors do." The wire remains. But for many, the mental fence has disappeared. August 20th, the question. During a routine labor assignment, a local Colorado rancher named John Carver offers Mueller and two other POWs lemonade. He's 60, gray-haired, and missing half his left hand from a farming accident. He asks, not unkindly, "Why'd you boys fight for Hitler?" Mueller doesn't hesitate. "Because we didn't know better. Or maybe we did, but we were too afraid to ask questions." Carver nods slowly, looking past the barbed wire to the open hills. "Well, you know better now, don't you?" Mueller doesn't answer. He just looks at the vast sky over the Colorado plains and thinks how small Germany must seem now. August 23rd, the list grows. Word spreads that the War Department is quietly collecting names of prisoners who might want to remain in the U.S. after the war. Officially, it's just a cultural interest survey. But everyone knows what it really is. A list. By the end of the week, over 1,000 German POWs across camps in Texas, Colorado, and Nebraska add their names. Some cite fear of retribution from Nazis back home. Others have American girlfriends or want to find one. But for many, like Miller, it's something deeper. "This country gave me back my dignity," he tells the camp's chaplain. "I would rather build something here than try to unbury what's left of home." August 27th, resistance within. Not everyone agrees. At Camp Algona, Iowa, a group of hardline prisoners paints swastikas on the walls of the library and tears up copies of the camp newspaper. They call the re-education classes brainwashing and accuse others of betrayal. One night, a young prisoner named Hans Frey is assaulted in the showers. His offense? Publicly denouncing Hitler and stating he would like to remain in America. The attackers are caught and removed to a high-security camp in North Dakota, known for housing die-hard Nazis. In the mess hall the next morning, someone has chalked a message on the board. "We choose our future, not your past." September 1st. American civilians take notice. Newspapers begin to pick up the story. An article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch runs the headline, "German POWs request to stay in U.S. After war, they found freedom in captivity." Some readers are outraged. Letters to the editor pour in. "They were our enemies. Let them rebuild their own country. My son died fighting them, now they want our kindness." But others defend it. A widow from Ohio writes, "If we treat them with dignity, maybe they return as men, not monsters." Isn't that the better victory? The debate echoes across the country. But inside the camps, the prisoners keep working, keep reading, keep dreaming, and the list keeps growing. September 5th, the quiet promise. At Camp Trinidad, Lieutenant Harold Benson, the camp's cultural officer, gathers a small group of prisoners for an informal meeting. "There's no guarantee," he says. "When the war ends, you'll likely be repatriated by default. But if you've built a life here, made friendships, earned trust, your chances improve." Miller leans forward. "And if we go back?" Benson exhales. "Then I hope you take a piece of this place with you. The better piece." Later that night, Mueller lies awake in his bunk, staring at the pine beams above. The wind whistles outside, brushing the walls with the same sound as trees back home. But somehow, this doesn't feel foreign anymore. It feels still. It feels possible. September 9th, a symbolic step. The prisoners are marched to a nearby church in town for a community concert. It's the first time they've left the wire without armed guards walking at their sides. They are unchained. As they enter the small-town chapel, locals murmur nervously. Then watch as 80 German POWs sit quietly in pews, hands folded, listening to a choir of American children sing, "America the Beautiful." At the end, a young girl walks up to Mueller and hands him a small note written in crayon. "Thank you for helping Daddy on the farm. I hope you stay. You're nice." He blinks back tears. And for the first time since the Afrika Korps surrendered in Tunisia, he lets himself imagine a future with no uniform, no flag, just a name, a job, and a place to wake up. Maybe even in Colorado. May 8th, 1945, Camp Hearn, Texas, WWII Day. It's 10:30 inches the morning when the sirens go off, not for an air raid but for victory. The sound rises over the Texas prairie like a wave. Guards step outside their towers, caps in hand. American flags snap in the wind as Jeep radios crackle the news. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. Inside the camp, the German prisoners freeze. Corporal Karl Müller is sweeping out the woodworking shed when he hears the sirens. He stops, leaning on the broom handle. His knuckles go white. A nearby MP approaches, not unkindly. "It's done," he says. "They signed last night in Reims. Your war is over." Müller doesn't respond. He just nods, slowly, and stares at the sawdust floating in the sunlight. For the men behind the wire, the war is over. But the future is more uncertain than ever. May 9th, reactions divide the camp. At first, the reactions are mixed. Some cheer quietly. A few shake hands. One man, a former Luftwaffe pilot, openly weeps in the corner of the barracks. Another, a die-hard SS sergeant, punches the wall and bloodies his knuckles. But the overwhelming emotion isn't celebration. It's fear. What happens now? Weber asks that night. Do we go back? To what? Rubble? Revenge? Müller doesn't answer. He's still holding the letter from his sister, dated April 21st. The Russians are outside Berlin. Father hasn't spoken in days. We are out of coal. I saw a man beaten to death for a sack of flour. He tucks the letter under his mattress, beside the folded application to stay. May 15th, repatriation orders begin. The War Department issues guidance. All German POWs must be repatriated, in accordance with international law, but the process will take months. Transport ships are limited. Reconstruction efforts require labor. Until then, the prisoners will remain where they are. To the surprise of many, a few camps receive upgrades, better bedding, new books, even art supplies. Some call it propaganda. Others see it for what it is, a last effort to leave an impression before the men return to a devastated homeland. At Camp Hearn, the commandant posts a notice. You will be going home. But how you leave matters. You represent yourselves now, not your orders. May 22nd. Goodbye, America. Müller is assigned to a final harvest crew, bringing in cotton for a local farm that lost 3 sons to the war. The farmer, Mr. Alton Briggs, doesn't say much, just nods when the boys arrive, hands them work gloves, and walks them to the field. But at the end of the week, he pulls Müller aside and presses something into his hand. A worn leather Bible. "This was mine," he says. "You earned it. Don't let the past define the rest of your life, son." Müller stares at the man, unsure what to say. No one has ever called him son in English. He says nothing, just nods. That night, he wraps the Bible in a clean cloth and places it carefully into his satchel. June 5th, the last lesson. The camp's final lecture series is led by Lieutenant Benson, Parting Thoughts from the Re-Education Program. He addresses the prisoners seated on wooden benches in the chapel-turned-classroom. You were taught to obey. You were told that violence made a nation strong, that cruelty meant survival. But what did it bring you? No one speaks. Benson pauses, then continues. Some of you will return to cities with no roofs, to families missing faces, to a country that will not recognize itself. He steps closer. But some of you, I hope, will carry something different back with you. An idea, a question, maybe even a new voice. He points to his heart. Don't let the Reich take that from you too. June 12th, processing begins. Camps across the U.S. begin the process of out-processing. Each man is photographed, fingerprinted again, and reissued civilian clothes, often American-made, donated by local communities or war relief charities. When Müller receives his new outfit, a button-down shirt and khaki slacks, he stares at them in disbelief. He hasn't worn civilian clothes since 1938. He dresses slowly, carefully, as if afraid they'll be taken away. When he looks in the mirror, he barely recognizes himself. No insignia, no armband, no swastika, just a man. June 17th, letters to the President. At Camp Trinidad, a group of prisoners is granted a unique opportunity to write farewell letters addressed to President Harry S. Truman. They won't be answered, but the War Department agrees to forward them. Müller writes his letter on the camp typewriter. Dear Mr. President, I arrived here as an enemy. I leave as a student. Your country treated me not with hatred, but with principle. I cannot forget that. My wish is to stay not for comfort, but for character. If that cannot happen, I will still carry your values in my pocket and in my conscience. Respectfully, Karl Müller, former corporal, German Army, Camp Hearn, Texas. He signs it, folds it, hands it in. It feels like a confession and a promise. June 21st, the train to New York. At 0600 hours, a transport truck pulls up outside the barracks. Müller climbs in with Weber and 15 others. The camp gate opens, creaking on rusted hinges. American guards salute as the trucks pass through. No one cheers. No one jeers. Just silence, and perhaps something like respect. The train to New York takes 3 days. Along the way, Müller sees towns untouched by bombs, children playing in front yards, old men tipping their hats at passing trains. In Pennsylvania, an old woman at a station platform holds up a sign as the train slows to refuel. Good luck, boys. Go in peace. Müller stares until the sign fades from view. June 24th, Pier 86, Manhattan. The ship is waiting. The SS Marine Flasher, loaded with German POWs bound for Bremen. Müller Bordslast. At the top of the gangway, an American officer extends his hand. Good luck, son. Müller hesitates, then shakes it firmly. Thank you. For everything. He boards the ship with a Bible in his bag, an application still folded in his shirt pocket, and a future yet to be claimed. Behind him, the Manhattan skyline glows against the rising Sunday. A world left behind. A question carried forward. July 6th, 1945, Port of Bremen, Germany. Rain lashes the harbor. The sea is gray and flat, broken only by rusted cranes and shattered warehouses leaning like drunks along the dockside. The SS Marine Flasher groans as it pulls alongside the pier, gangways creaking into place. Karl Müller steps onto German soil for the first time in 3 years. His boots splash down in a puddle of rainwater and coal soot. No band plays. No welcome committee waits. Only silence. And smoke. Behind the fence line, a German officer in a frayed greatcoat scans a clipboard and barks names. Prisoners, now repatriated men, are directed into queues for paperwork, interrogation, and reassignment. Müller looks around at the other returnees. Their civilian clothes are already soaked. The wind cuts through them like they're still wearing the thin POW uniforms from Texas. One man mutters, "It doesn't feel like coming home." Müller doesn't answer. Because it doesn't. July 8th, the debrief. He's sent to a temporary processing center outside Hanover, little more than tents and burnt-out schoolhouses turned into offices. Inside, a thin man in a civilian suit sits behind a desk. British accent, Intelligence Corps armband. He doesn't smile. "What were you told in the camps?" the man asks. "What were you taught?" Müller replies evenly. "About democracy. About rights. About thinking for yourself." The man scribbles notes. "And what did you believe?" Müller pauses, then says quietly, "Enough to ask if I can go back." The man stops writing. Looks up. "To America," he says. Müller nods. The man doesn't say yes, doesn't say no. Just underlines something on the page and gestures for the next prisoner. July 10th, Würzburg, Bavaria. Müller steps off a supply truck 20 miles from his hometown. There's no public transport, no functioning rail line. He walks the rest of the way. The road is cracked and muddy. Dead trees line the path like gravestones. When he crests the final hill, he sees what used to be Würzburg. It looks like Dresden's cousin, flattened, silent, blackened. Church steeples collapsed, houses cleaved open like broken dollhouses. He walks the streets in disbelief, passing children picking through rubble and women carrying water in metal pots. No cars, no horses, just quiet ruin. His family's building on Ludwigstrasse is gone. Nothing but brick and ash. A neighbor recognizes him, old Frau Becker, from the bakery down the street. "Karl?" she whispers. "My God, you lived?" He nods. She hugs him tightly and sobs. She tells him his father died in the bombings, his mother the winter before. His sister fled east with her son, no word since. And just like that, the war feels real again. Not battles, not speeches. Loss. July. 12th Hunger. There is no welcome meal. No Red Cross parcels. No supply depots. He trades his leather belt for a loaf of stale bread. Sleeps in the cellar of a half-bombed school with 6 other returnees. One of them, a former Feldwebel, says he regrets not surrendering to the Americans earlier. I heard their camps had football and newspapers. He mutters bitterly. We had rats and frostbite. Müller doesn't correct him. He lies awake that night, remembering Texas sunsets. Thanksgiving turkey. A little girl's crayon note. He wonders if she ever thinks about the German helper who fixed the fence and carried milk buckets. Probably not, but he remembers her. July 15th, a different uniform. With no family to return to, Müller looks for work. Any work. He's offered a position cleaning rubble for the occupying American forces, one of the displaced German volunteer units attached to Army engineers. He's issued a blue armband with DP stamped on it and told not to speak to American soldiers unless spoken to. His first job is clearing debris from a former Gestapo office. He finds papers, photographs, shackles still bolted to basement walls. He vomits behind a collapsed desk and doesn't go back in. But he returns the next day, and the next, working beside Poles, Frenchmen, and other Germans who once wore the wrong uniform. No one talks about the past. Only the weight of bricks, the ache in backs, the smell of plaster dust and old blood. July 22nd, the decision. After 2 weeks of labor, Müller visits a local Allied liaison office. He carries his old application to stay in the U.S., the one they let him keep. It's faded, water-streaked, and still smells faintly of pine from Camp Hearn. He walks into the office and hands it to the American clerk behind the desk. The clerk squints at it. You're serious? Yes, Müller replies. I've seen both countries now. One taught me how to salute. The other taught me how to ask questions. The clerk gives a slow nod. We're not running Ellis Island down the street, you know. I know, Müller says. But I still have hope. August 1st letters sent. Back in his temporary shelter, Müller begins writing. One letter goes to Mr. Alton Briggs in Colorado, the farmer, with the half-hand who gave him a Bible. I hope you're well. I've returned, but it isn't home. I still carry what you gave me, and not just the book. The second letter is to Lieutenant Benson. Sir, if you remember me, I am trying to return, not as a prisoner, as a man. He posts them both through the U.S. military mail system. No guarantee they'll arrive. But hope doesn't require guarantees. Just the chance. August 12th. One more question. At the refugee camp that night, a young boy approaches Müller, shoeless, dirt-smudged, holding a potato with both hands. Were you a soldier? The boy asks. Yes, Müller replies. Did you win? Müller looks at the cracked sky, the jagged bones of his hometown, the ashes of everything he once believed. Then he smiles, just slightly. No, he says. But I learned something better. September 3rd, 1945 near Würzburg, Bavaria. Karl Müller wakes before sunrise, as he does every day now, not because of military orders, but out of habit and hunger. The mornings are cold already, dew clinging to the exposed bricks outside the makeshift shelter where he sleeps. His breath fogs in the pale light. He boils water over a tin can stove and sips it slowly, pretending it's coffee. Then, around 9 a.m., a British Red Cross jeep pulls up to the edge of the refugee station with mail. Most of the men don't bother looking anymore, but Müller does. And this time, his name is called. He stands slowly, heart pounding, as the British aid worker hands him a clean white envelope printed with red-framed U.S. postage and neatly typed in all caps. From Left Harold Benson, Cultural Officer, Camp Hearn, Texas. His fingers tremble. September 5th, the letter. He reads it twice before believing it. Corporal Müller, I was moved by your letter. You spoke of conscience, of rebuilding not as an act of shame, but of dignity. I have forwarded your request to the appropriate liaison at the U.S. War Department. You should know that the odds are not good. Repatriation rules are firm. But there is one option. Asterisk. Congress has authorized a limited number of sponsored employment and academic exchange cases, mostly for skilled tradesmen or former POWs who supported the democratization program. A professor at the University of Kansas, an old friend of mine, has expressed interest in hosting a candidate for a fellowship in post-conflict ethics and civic education. I remembered your interest in the re-education classes. If you can gather the necessary documentation and transport to Frankfurt by October 1st, he's willing to make a formal request for you to be considered. No promises, but perhaps a possibility. Yours sincerely, Lieutenant Harold Benson. Camp Hearn, Texas. Mueller lowers the letter into his lap, then presses his forehead to it. He doesn't cry, but he breathes deeper than he has in months. September 7th. The search for paper. Getting to Frankfurt is one thing. Getting documentation is another. The local government office is in ruins. The Allied administration is overwhelmed. Mueller waits in line for 8 hours to apply for a civilian identity pass and travel voucher. He's told to come back the next week. No guarantees. "Why are you trying to leave?" the clerk asks, glancing over his soiled clothes. "I'm not running," Mueller replies. "I'm returning to something I never expected to find." The clerk doesn't understand, but stamps the paper anyway. September 12th. The photographer. In order to complete his application, Mueller needs a new photo. The only working camera in Würzburg belongs to an old Jewish man, Levi Grunberg, who survived the war by hiding in a church basement, and now operates a tiny photo stand in what was once a butcher's shop. When Mueller walks in, he removes his cap and bows his head slightly. Grunberg eyes him for a long moment. "You Wehrmacht?" he asks, without malice. "I was," Mueller replies quietly, "but I'm not anymore. Grunberg not swonte." "Sit." The camera clicks. The shutter opens and closes like a breath. Mueller picks up the developed photo the next day. In it, he looks older than 27. The war is etched into his face. But there is something else, too. A kind of defiant calm, like a man who knows who he is, and who he no longer wishes to be. September 15th, the last trade. To afford the train to Frankfurt, Mueller must trade nearly everything he owns. The boots he was issued in the POW camp go for 3 ration slips and a ride to the next town. His Bible, the one given to him by the farmer in Colorado, he keeps. He sells the spare shirt, the tin kettle, even the wool blanket. All to buy one last thing, a cheap leather satchel and a clean undershirt. If he was going to walk into the American zone, he wanted to do it as a man, not a beggar. September 29th, the journey to Frankfurt. The train is half wood, half rust, and filled with more silence than passengers. As the countryside rolls past, Mueller stares out the window at flattened villages and ghostly forests. Once, a convoy of American trucks passes on the highway beside them. He sits up, peering at the soldiers inside. They look relaxed, laughing, clean. He wonders if they fought in Italy or Normandy, or maybe they were stationed in the States the whole time. He doesn't resent them. He envies them. They know what their country stands for. He's still trying to figure that out for his own. September 30th, the American office, Frankfurt. The U.S. military government headquarters looms like a fortress of order in a city of ruin. Inside, Mueller is ushered into a waiting room with steel chairs and a single clock ticking overhead. His paperwork sits in a neat folder. Identity card, sponsor letter, repatriation number, translated academic transcripts from his university days salvaged from a burned file cabinet, barely legible. An American officer in a pressed uniform calls his name. "Mr. Karl Müller, step forward." "Hey, Risas." Art pounding. The officer looks over the file. "You were at Camp Hearn?" "Yes, sir." "Supported re-education?" "Yes, sir." The officer nods slowly, then adds, "Says here you've been recommended for a fellowship. No precedent for this, but I've got orders to process the request." He stamps the first page with a loud thud. Then, without looking up, says, "Next interview is October 3rd. If approved, you'll be on a boat within the month." Pause. Don't waste it. Müller, ex-Halles. The war is over, but the second chance is just beginning. October 3rd, 1945 American Consular Office, Frankfurt, Hem. The hallway smells like floor polish and cigarettes. A line of men, Polish, French, Czech, and a handful of Germans wait in tense silence outside a closed door marked Cultural Resettlement Screening. Inside, behind a steel desk and a stack of typed forms, sits Colonel Martin J. Brewster, U.S. Army Civil Affairs. He doesn't smile, but he doesn't scowl either. He has reviewed dozens of candidates for repatriation, relocation, or rare exceptions like the one now on his desk. Karl Mueller, ex-Wehrmacht, non-party affiliate, POW Camp Hearn, Texas applicant for academic cultural exchange. He glances at the file again as Mueller steps into the room. Danke sehr, Mr. Mueller. Mueller sits. His hands are folded, palms sweating. Brewster reads aloud. You worked in a POW camp newspaper, participated in ethics seminars, taught basic English to fellow prisoners, and helped organize a harvest crew on a Colorado farm. Is that correct? Yes, sir. You also submitted a letter from Lieutenant Harold Benson and a university professor named Charles W. Everly recommending you for a civic education fellowship. Yes, sir. Brewster leans forward. Why do you want to go back to the United States? What are you hoping to find? Mueller's eyes don't flinch. Not comfort, he says. A place to become useful again as more than just a survivor. October 10th. The response. He waits 6 more days in a temporary barrack with 40 other men. Rumors circulate. One applicant was approved for Canada. Another was denied and burst into tears. Mueller sits on the concrete floor, rereading Benson's letter until it begins to crease at the edges. Then, a corporal steps in with a clipboard. Reassignments posted. The room quiets. He begins reading names. Country. Status. Number 127. Karl Müller. United States. Approved. Report to Pier 26. Bremerhaven. Departure. October 18th. Miller doesn't react immediately, just closes his eyes. The ache in his chest, the one that began when he saw Würzburg in ruins, begins to lift. He isn't going back to the Reich. He's going forward to something else. October 17th, Pier 26, Bremerhaven. Fog rolls off the North Sea like a ghost curtain as the Liberty ship SS Stephen F. Austin rocks gently at the dock. It's not a troop carrier this time. No gun turrets, no battalion orders. Just a quiet manifest of names. Most of them post-war exchange candidates, engineers, translators, agricultural specialists, and one former German corporal with a Bible and a dream. He boards with a single satchel. Inside, a clean shirt, a folded recommendation, and a photo of himself taken by a Jewish survivor. As the engines rumble to life, he stands at the rail, watching the coastline of Germany disappear into the mist. Not goodbye. Note exile. Just a new heading. October 26th arrival. Boston Harbor. The ship glides into dock beneath overcast skies. The Statue of Liberty is far away, but the harbor smells of salt and diesel and something else. Possibility. Mueller is processed at the port by civilian immigration staff. His visa is stamped. Temporary residence approved under Academic Exchange Provision 14A. He is given a small allowance, a packet of train tickets, and an address. University of Kansas, Lawrence. Department of Philosophy Professor Charles W. Everly. The staffer behind the counter raises an eyebrow at his status. You're the first Wehrmacht soldier I've seen come back with a fellowship, not a rifle. Mueller offers a thin smile. I brought both once. I'd rather carry neither. The man stamps the file and hands him a warm coat. You're gonna need this in Kansas. October train tath Kansas bound. The train cuts through miles of rolling countryside red barns, yellowing cornfields, and small-town water towers painted with American flags. Mueller watches the land pass like a silent movie. At a small station in Topeka, a group of high school students waits on the platform. One of them holds a sign, "Welcome, exchange students, University of Kansas." He steps off and is met by a short man with horn-rimmed glasses, a tweed coat, and a pipe in his mouth. You must be Mr. Mueller. Professor Everly? They shake hands. I've read your letters. Your record is unusual, but impressive. Come. The department is eager to meet you. You'll have housing and a small stipend. We begin next week. Mueller follows him into a waiting car. He watches the Kansas sky stretch out above them like an unbroken promise. November 4th. First class. The chalk squeaks on the blackboard. Reconciliation through ethics. Post-conflict identity. Professor Everly turns to the small classroom. This is a class about building what war destroys the inner republic of the human being. Mueller sits in the second row, a spiral-bound notebook in front of him, pencil in hand. When asked to introduce himself, he stands and speaks plainly. My name is Carl Mueller. I was a soldier once, then a prisoner, then something else. I came here because I believe democracy must be earned, not by force, but by asking the right questions. No one laughs. No one scoffs. They nod, and then the class begins. November 11th. A new uniform. He walks the campus in a donated peacoat, boots scuffed but clean. He carries books now: Plato, Kant, Roosevelt, Niebuhr. The campus is filled with returned GIs, American veterans now studying alongside him. Some give him strange looks when they hear the accent. One vet from New Jersey squints and asks, "You a Kraut?" Mueller doesn't flinch. "I was. Now, I'm just a student." The GI pauses, then shrugs. "Well, hell, you drink coffee?" They sit together that afternoon. Mueller listens, learns, shares. He tells them about Colorado, the little girl with the crayon letter, the Texas Sunday, and for the first time someone says, "You're one of us now." November 15th, a letter to Germany. That night, Mueller writes by lamplight. "Dear Weber, I made it. Kansas is cold, but the people are kind. I've been asked to speak at a lecture series next month. I think about you often, about the camp, about the questions we used to whisper under our breath. I found a country that lets me ask them aloud. I hope you're well, and I hope truly you'll get your second chance too. Yours, Carl." He seals the envelope and stares for a moment at the return address. For the first time in years, it feels like more than just a temporary location. It feels like home. December 10th, 1945, Lawrence, Kansas. Snow drifts along the edges of campus, soft and powdery, blanketing red brick buildings and bending tall pines under its weight. Christmas lights flicker gently in dormitory windows, and the smell of burning firewood curls from chimneys into the Kansas sky. Carl Mueller walks slowly through the quad, boots crunching with each step. In his gloved hands is a worn satchel. Inside it, a stack of notes, pages covered in handwritten English, quotes from Plato, and passages about civic duty, dignity, and the moral collapse of societies built on fear. Tonight is his first public lecture. He's not nervous. He's astonished that he is here, that this is real, that less than a year ago, he was behind barbed wire in Texas, not as a student or a speaker, but as a prisoner of war. And now, here he is, a guest of a democracy he once tried to destroy, preparing to speak in its name. December 10th, 7:05 p.m., Watson Hall. The room is fuller than expected. 50, maybe 60 students, professors, and returned GIs sit on folding chairs beneath the warm glow of overhead lamps. A banner above the lectern reads, "Civics After War, the Ethical Foundations of Peace." Professor Everly introduces him. "This evening, we welcome Mr. Carl Mueller, who has seen both sides of war. Not as a general, not as a politician, but as a man who once believed in something dangerous and who had the courage to let go." Carl steps up to the podium, adjusts the mic, glances briefly at his notes, and then folds them closed. He begins without reading. "I was born in Würzburg in 1918, the year Germany lost the First War," he says, voice steady. "By the time I was 15, I was marching in youth parades and saluting a flag that promised pride, strength, and vengeance." He pauses. "That flag led me to war, to defeat, and to a prisoner's camp in a country I was taught to hate." He looks out at the crowd, eyes focused, no pity in them, only curiosity. "I arrived in Texas expecting revenge. I found something else. A library, a lecture hall, A teacher who didn't shout, who asked questions. Some students nod. The veterans in the back shift forward slightly. I was treated like a man, even when I didn't deserve it. I was shown laws, freedoms, ideas, not propaganda principles. He lets the silence sit for a breath. When I returned home, my city was rubble. My family was gone. My country was lost. But I knew then, the place I wanted to rebuild from wasn't where I was born. He holds up a worn envelope, Benson's original letter. This letter saved my life. It didn't promise me citizenship or forgiveness, just a chance. He closes with a single sentence, carefully chosen. I lost one war, but I found something stronger than any victory. The freedom to choose what kind of man I would be next. The room doesn't erupt in applause. It rises slowly to its feet, silent, respectful, deeply moved. And Karl Müller, once a soldier of the Reich, bows his head in gratitude. December 25th, 1945 amperes, Kansas Christmas. The holiday is quiet. Snow hangs like a whisper over the rooftops. Karl spends the morning helping in a local church kitchen, serving coffee and sweet rolls to the poor. Later, he visits Professor Everly's home for dinner. There are carols, laughter, roast duck, and cranberry sauce. Someone hands him a small wrapped package. Inside is a new copy of the Declaration of Independence, leather-bound, with his name embossed on the cover. He blinks, says nothing, but the room understands. January 1946 citizenship question. It starts with a note from Professor Everly. There may be an opening in the Foreign Service Education Program. If you're interested, we could explore a long-term path to residency, perhaps even naturalization. Müller doesn't hesitate. He walks to the administrative office the next day and requests the forms. The clerk looks up, brows raised. You're the German fellow from the talk last month? Yes, Müller says. The clerk smiles. We were wondering if you'd ask. February 1946 amperes. Letter to Camp Hearn. He writes with deliberate care. Dear Lieutenant Benson, I wanted you to know I've begun applying for residency. The university has sponsored me, and I've been offered a place in the continuing education program. I speak at schools now. Sometimes I teach what I once refused to learn. You changed the direction of my life not by converting me, but by allowing me to question who I had become. That is real freedom. That is democracy. He includes a photo taken by a Kansas photographer this time. He's smiling in front of a lecture hall, coat buttoned to the neck, arms folded across a stack of books. A far cry from the man who once stood in line for rations behind barbed wire. March 1946. The future begins. A year ago, Karl Müller was one of 6,000 German prisoners in Texas. Today, he is one of 3 foreign nationals accepted into a U.S. academic citizenship pathway program. He doesn't know what comes next. He doesn't know if his application will be approved, if his new life will last, or if the past will ever truly let go. But he does know this. He is not the man he was. And this country, the one that took him in not with fire, but with books and dignity, gave him that chance. April 8th, 1946 Amper School Auditorium, Wichita. He stands before a group of high school seniors. The auditorium smells of chalk and wood polish. A girl in the front row raises her hand. You used to be our enemy, she says. Do you still feel like one? Müller smiles. I did, he replies, until someone treated me like something better, and I decided to become it. She nods. No further questions. The audience claps not because he is perfect, but because he is honest, because the truth still matters, and because in a war that consumed the world, he found a victory that required no gun, a quiet victory, a human one.